Seeing is the challenge. The lessons are all around us.
What is up, champions? Welcome to another episode of Champion Reads, where we talk about best-selling books and their best principles to help you out with your best life. I am your co-host, Coach Willie Blake. I'm here with my other co-host, Mr. Ian Sturmer, and our guest, the founder of Champion Circle, Mr. John Covey Jr. And today we are going into another episode of the book that we chose this month, which is, and if you guys have it, show it on your screen, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. That's what we got going on. We got a red book, we got a blue book, and we got Ian having the book audio. We'll go with that.
Yes.
We're jumping right into the topic because today we're going to talk about the circles. Now, at Champion Circle, we like circles. Circles are really nice, and we'll keep it at that because I know we might have John get a little blushy with this conversation. We're jumping into the circle of influence, circle of concern, and the circle of control. Not in that order, because you have the circle of concern, which is everything in your world, everything that is the problem, the obstacle, everything that you see as an inconvenience. Something that concerns you. Then out of that circle, it goes in a little bit more, which is your circle of influence. This is the circle that you are able to influence, that you're able to have an input in, that if you do something, it will be of influence in this circle. But then there's the smaller circle, which is the circle of control. These are the things that you are able to control in your life. And I'm excited for this discussion because literally before we jumped on here, Ian and John were very patient with me because I was getting a kid ready for school, ready for picture day, and I was late on this call. And I got to tell you, it was a concern of everything going on between this call, getting the kid ready. My influence was I was able to influence my kids to do whatever they needed to get there. And then I had no control. So I'm very just excited to talk about this today.
Very relevant, yeah.
Yeah, very relevant. Let's throw it right in. Like, that's my example. When it comes to concern, influence, control, Ian, John, what comes to your mind when you read this topic?
I'll jump right in.
Go, John.
You're like, there's so many cool things about concern versus influence, and we'll talk about circles in a moment. As you said, I can really dive deep into circles, but
circles and curves. They're all
circles and curves and combinations, right? And conspiracy theories. No, that's not our podcast. But circles, right? But concern versus influence. I love this. And what a great example, Willie. And don't worry, Ian and I were trading Pokemon cards and doing all kinds of stuff in the waiting room while happening. But this is very relevant because entrepreneurs, right? People who are in business, they are learning this on a daily basis. So if it wasn't the kids getting ready for picture day at school, it's another thing. It's the milk spilled in the fridge. It's the everything that it happens in our daily lives can either be how do I say this? It can be observed and what's the word? It's on the tip of my tongue. It can either be absorbed and applied through either concern or influence. And it is a control thing. However, we'll get into control later. But rather than that, concern is part of the positive feelings and analysis by this. Because if we didn't have concern, then there wouldn't be anything to apply or anything to attend to or anything to work with. But influence is what we can do with it. And so in Ian, or with Willie's example, influence is what he could add to lighten the concern, right? and of course we know the tornado that is children, period. But at the same time, like
Period. End of sentence. There's a
and
period. Yeah.
enough said, they say. And with that being said, like when it comes to concerns, we all have a long list of entrepreneurial concerns, the things that we need to get done, the things that we don't have, how are we going to pay our bills, how are we going to sell the next project, yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to influence, that's where what can we do with what we have at the time right now? And again, it may feel like out of control. It may feel like no control. And that's a feeling, not an exact replication of what truly is happening. Our influence goes far beyond it. And one last example, and I'll pass it over to you guys because I want to be fast with my answers. It's a cheesy one, but you ever saw a body of water just pure as glass, not a single ripple? And then you, because you're a man, you got to throw a rock in, right? Okay. And so you do that. You throw a rock into this beautiful, placid lake, and boom, you see it. And it's the first initial ripple effect, right? And you see these little tiny waves spread out, and they slowly get bigger and bigger and expand and expand. Hey, speaking of circles. And then it's not just the outer circle, but there's following circles, like little inner ripples. And if you were to run the math equation on the expansion of the exponential component of the growth of those ripples, that is truly what we do in everything we do when we're working towards solving a problem, identifying a solution to a concern. And our influence is the small things that expand and have greater reach than anyone knows. One last thing. The other day, there was something that literally spilled in the milk, or spilled in the refrigerator. That's why I said the spilled milk in the refrigerator example. And no one was around, and I could have easily just covered it up and moved on. But I thought, no, I'm going to clean it now. And so that was my influence. Now, the problem is I have an ego. And so when we were both sitting down for dinner, I said, hey, babe, I'm not looking for validation, but I just wanted you to know there was something sticky in the fridge and I cleaned it. And she goes, oh, so you're looking for attention, or you want to congratulate you. Good job, buddy. Did you do a good job? And I was like, you're right. I guess I said it because I did feel like I needed something, but I wasn't trying to. I was just trying to, or because if no one knew it happened, then no one knew it happened, right? And that was my problem. But no one needed to know, because as long as it remains clean, stays in a state of flow, a state of influence, it can expand. Because even though she didn't know it happened, my influence, that ripple effect, can reach more people. Okay, I'll get off my high horse on this. I just wanted to kick us off with those examples, because truly influence has greater impact over concern when we address it. But concern is a driver. So I'll pass it over to you guys.
Okay. Well, I think you brought up a natural law of life in this, that if a husband says, I am not looking for validation, he is looking for validation. That's just the way we go.
He must be validated, right? Then and
yes.
there.
And there's actually a question there, not to go off on your milk story, but if there's milk there and you go and clean it up, what is the purpose of you cleaning it up? Was that purpose to clean it up, or was that purpose to look for some type of outside validation? And I'm trying to tie this back into the whole circles, but it made me think about that a lot. So I'm going to just move on and talk about this more.
Go ahead. Yeah, I took you down a rabbit hole, but
you have the ability to control and influence cleaning it up, but then whether or not you get the validation, you don't really have control over. And I think sometimes we get sucked into what's an outcome we want. And instead of looking at our circle of control, we start looking at our circle of concern. And C.S. Lewis, in his wonderful book, The Screw Tape Letters, if you're not familiar with the book, it's a old Christian book about a master devil teaching an apprentice devil how to pull souls away and bring them down to hell. But he talks about that, and he says one of the greatest ways is to get people really excited about politics, get them hating the other side, get them just sharing everything they can evil about those guys on that side of the aisle, which is the purpose of Facebook, as we all know, is to spout political rantings, and that's the most effective way to change politics, I say jokingly. But how often do we get caught up in that, oh, if I say something loud enough, I'm going to change this, or, I'm going to say something mildly political here. We get so excited about the presidential election that we have really no influence whatsoever over. And we don't even look at the school board, where we actually have some influence on it. So do we get so excited about these big picture things that we can't control? Or do we focus on things that are within our control that will ripple out? And I would say the most important election is the school board, because good school board people will move on to the city council. And the good city council people will move on to be mayor, and the good mayors will move on to the state, and so forth. And then you can influence a ripple going outward. But if you try and influence that last circle of the pebble dropping in, you can't do that. You can only influence your small single dot where that pebble hits. That's your circle of influence. And the concerns are going to ripple out from there. So it's so much fun to get wrapped up in why so-and-so didn't win American Idol, or, who won the presidential election in, Serbia, or whatever it is that doesn't affect us. But instead, if we focus on what we can control and see those ripples go out, then we can get to the influence. But we can control things ourselves instead of getting stressed with what's going on in those outer ridges that can only be affected after we affect our circle of influence. So.
Right on the money. Think of it as you got the big circle of concern, circle of influence, and then circle of control. If you think about it a little bit more, circle of concern is everything you worry about. Circle of influence is through your actions in the immediate space around you, what you're able to interact with, be able to activate around you. But then concern is everything inside of you. When it control, there we go. Knew as a C word. Everything you're able to control is inside of you, because it goes back to the language that Stephen R. Covey talks about, which is the proactive versus reactive. There's a reason why it's called responsible, because it's your ability to respond, right? That's your responsibility. So if you are reactive in the way that, great example as it just came up, had to be a year and a half ago. I woke up out of bed. I was I was back in Utah, woke up, went to the bathroom, and the bathroom light was on. I'm like, okay. So I walk in and slowly open the door. And as I slowly open the door, I knew that my oldest was already awake, because that's usually the only reason why the bathroom light's on. But as I opened it, I saw on the ground strands of hair. And as I pushed it open, my oldest, who was 4 at the time, had a pair of not even like big scissors. We're talking the little makeup scissors that they have. Makeup scissors, and she cut her hair, which was about chest level, all the way up to just around her ear. And my reaction at the time was to throw up my hands like this and be like, there's no way. Okay, little proud moment that I shouldn't be proud of. She did a great job at her hair. She had to have done this for like an hour with the little scissors that she had to be able to cut it that way. She did great with her hair. But on the bigger side of things, she cut her hair, and I knew that we had pictures in 2 weeks with the family, and there's this everything goes with it. But my initial reaction was to hold my hands like this. Then my second reaction was, it might have been because just of who I am. Whenever I get overloaded by too much, my emotions tend to shut off, and I just get done what needs to get done. And so when I saw that, I just stood there and looked at her and said, let's get this hair cleaned up. Didn't mention anything about her hair. Just said, let's get this hair cleaned up. So we cleaned up her hair. And then I'm like, okay, next thing we need to do is we need to go tell mom. So I went and said, Kayla, you gotta come look at this. Be prepared. This is something that might make you emotional. And she's like, what is it? And I'm like, nobody died. But pictures are in 2 weeks, so we're getting pretty close to it. So she walked in and she did the exact same thing. Her hands went up like that. And looking back on it, I reacted in the first sense, which is kind of like the human sense, the nature, the reaction of, oh my goodness, that just happened. But then my second and third and fourth, and I'm trying to remember what Stephen R. Covey calls this, but it's basically like you're not responsible for the first response. You're responsible for the second, third, and fourth, because the human nature, the side of things of how you've grown up, that's the way you first react. But the anger, the words, the everything else that comes after that, when that just the emotions of sadness, disappointment turn into then anger or just turning off emotions, and that the second, third, and fourth, that's what you put your experience in. That's what you get to control. And so that concern is out there. The influence is what's immediately around us, and our control is within us. And so when it comes to the difference between how to be reactive versus how to be proactive, you focus on what you can control. And that's always going to start with what's inside.
Yeah. And I want to add to that by taking the circles. Okay, here's the circle concept. And if you're listening to the audio and not watching the video, think of two circles side by side. And you've all seen the diagram where the circles overlap slightly in the middle, right? So there's two circles side by side, but they overlap slightly in the middle for a small little space. And if you put in one big circle, concern, okay? And if you put in another big circle, influence. And in just the tiny little overlapping space is when concern and influence unite. And Willie, that's exactly what you described. You had concern, but you knew that you had to react or be proactive in your communication and in your feelings. Although your feelings inside are probably like on fire, you had so much more that you could do with the situation. And now I bet your child doesn't have like a fear of hair clippings or anything like that. They're very intuitively anxious to learn and try new things and be independent, and that's really cool because those are amazing developmental attitudes, and to have them at such a young age is powerful. So I love this example, and with those circles, I mean, just to our audience, think about the level of concern you have and write that long list. And you're not even going to fit that long list inside that circle. You're going to need a whole like page. Okay. And then go over to your influence and write down the list of things you have influence over. And you'll be surprised at how long that list will be. But I think you'll go into writing the influence list and believe that there's not much you can write. But if you dig down deep, if you open up the hood inside what's going on in your world, you'll realize that almost equally, you'll have just as much influence, if not greater, than what you have over concerns. And when you live in that space in between, you can find incredible solutions. One of the things Willie brought up that I wanted to also include in our conversations today is reactive language versus proactive language, which comes from the power of communication. And I love that you held up your book earlier, Willie, because I have this version. I think this is the new updated version, which is why it's red and gold. Willie has an awesome, like the classic blue version, the one we all have come to learn and love and know. And I just needed to update mine. I also have this Living the 7 Habits. I found this first. And then I was like, last time we read this, I read and went and got the workbook. So my workbook is blue. But anyways, it's on like page 86. All right. And the be proactive habit. And I know that in the last episode, you and Ian talked about like, what do you think your strengths are and what do you think each other's strengths are? And I don't know which one, if proactive was one that either one of you chose. I think Willie may have chose that one, but I'm just guessing. I had a little bit of FOMO missing out on that conversation. But page 86. Here's some reactive language that I think that our listeners can take note on. Okay, reactive language. There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. Okay, they won't allow that. I have to do that. I can't. I must. If only. That's all reactive language, right? And I read it with a lot of emotion, so you could get the point. But here's what proactive language looks like on the opposite end of each one of those reactive languages. Let's look at our alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings. I can create an effective presentation. I will choose an appropriate response. I choose, I prefer, and I will. Those are proactive languages. And one last example. I know I've been so long-winded today. Geez, I just get so excited about these topics. And I want to leave content for everyone else. But have you ever had the feeling when you had an exchange and maybe you were so caught off guard or taken aback that you did not have the appropriate response, and then later down the road you're like, oh, I should have said that, that would have made me look so much cooler, or I would have won that fight or that argument, if I would have said something. It's like that post reaction. Well, here's the deal. That's reactive thinking, because if you live your life in a way where you're proactively able to assess the situation, right, then you can react appropriately versus reacting naturally. And proactive reaction or proactive language comes from a sense of maturity, a sense of control, and a sense of just knowing that, everything's going to be okay. Willie opens the door. He sees his daughter cutting her hair. Everything's going to be okay. It may not be what we thought it would be. Everything's not going to be the perfect picture that we thought it would look like when we imagined these pictured, these family photos, but it's going to be amazing. And as far as I remember, all your family photos look amazing. So knowing that will be the case, you took the proper proactive response. And when we are faced with trial, tribulation, surprises, okay, the right thing to do is to clean up the spilled milk. The wrong thing to do is to tell everyone that you did it. and that's what I'm trying to get to is maybe I'm just emitting my my reactiveness, right? But proactiveness is knowing that you can always win the fight. You can always win, or you can always be in a place where you can walk away proud of your proactiveness rather than your reaction. And that's a hard place to be, because we get plenty of practice, but yet we don't know we're practicing. We don't know we are in the arena. We don't know that we put on the gladiator's helmet and we're constantly on watch, but we are. And so practicing this is literally being able to take a big, deep breath and say, okay, what may. What do you guys think of that?
Well, first of all, I have to point out, John, remember that time you cleaned up that spilled milk? That was impressive, man. I've got to say, you are an inspiration here. But yeah, in reality, some of that, I mean, maybe that's what we're looking for sometimes. And that doesn't mean that that's a wrong thing to be looking for. But the idea is, what are we looking for? What is our real goal with this? What's the purpose of what we're doing? What do we want to accomplish? And are we proactively doing things to get there? And I kind of love that proactive, reactive. And each of you touched on something that I'm going to kind of put together because I think that's important. John, you kind of finished saying we're always practicing, and that practicing is wonderful because none of us are perfect yet. I had a conversation with a friend a little while ago, and it got kind of a religious aspect of what we were talking about. And she made a comment. It's like, oh, well, no one can ever be perfect. I said, well, no, I'm never going to be perfect, but that's my goal. I'm still striving for that. Even though I know I won't ever achieve it, I'm still trying to become more perfect. And she, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. So I'm practicing. I'm taking these reactive situations that I've gone through and saying, okay, how can I now turn those into a positive, proactive next time it comes up? And a lot of that is something Willie said, and I wrote this down. You have to shut off your emotion and just get what needs to be done. And I love that because our emotions so often get in the way of this thing. We get upset. We just wallow in self-pity about mistakes we've made rather than saying, okay, this is done. What can I do next time so I don't have that same situation again? And one of my little rules of life I live by, I can't control the weather, but I can carry an umbrella. So I can either get mad about the rain or I can get my umbrella out and be okay. I can be proactive in that because I've learned that when it rains and I don't have an umbrella, I get wet. And usually that's not a very comfortable situation to be in. So being proactive is actually very, very simple in that case. I have the ability and control for the most part to get an umbrella. And if I can't, then I get rid of the emotion. There's no sense getting upset about the rain coming down. All that's going to do is make me miserable and make the situation worse. There's no possible way me being upset about the rain is going to give a positive outcome. So get rid of the emotion. What needs to be done? Well, I find something to cover myself. I hide under a tree. I wait in the car. I say, well, this is a good reminder that next time I need the umbrella and it'll be a stronger motivation next time. So that we want to move from reactive to proactive. We want to move from circle of concern that we can't do anything about to a circle of influence and circle of control that we can do something about. But we only get there through our experiences and learning, whether it's firsthand or once in a while we're smart enough to learn something from a book or a podcast and apply that to our lives. So that's, don't get mad at the rain, just carry an umbrella.
Boom. Well said. That as we come towards the end of this, the final thing I want to share with you, awesome champions, is it is about control. But it's not just about the control. It's about when it's the concerns that you have, do they need to be a concern? Like most of the things that we're concerned about, do we actually need them in our life? In my experience, the answer is no. For a lot of the stuff that I was concerned about when back in my early 20s, there was a lot in there. I was watching the news, I was listening to politics, I was reading a lot, and all these voices were coming into my head. Message notifications, email notifications, and finally I chose to stop. I didn't want to be distracted from things that mattered most to me. I don't want my phone to continually ding when I was with my family. I don't want phone calls coming in. I didn't want, when I was putting my girls down to bed, me having to reply to an emergency or something happening to where, you know, all these different concerns that weren't really concerns came in. So I was proactive. I turned off all email notifications. Only time that I get to my email is when I get to my email. Only social media notifications, gone. Only notifications I get anymore as a fly lands on my face is, goodness gracious. See, I can control that. I can just wiper blade it off and keep the conversation going. Turn off those notifications. The only ones I still have are text messages that come in and messages from Facebook, just because I use that a lot. Those are the only two. Other than that, any other notifications on my phone, I just let it be, because I want control of how my life's going to be. I also don't listen to the news much anymore. There's so many voices that go into it and so many differing opinions. I just wait until all the emotional stuff are over, and then I read the summary of it. Or I got a wonderful wife and family who they watch the news and stuff, and they let me know of the stuff anyways. So I don't need to worry about it. We get to control not only what we can control, but we also get to control what concerns us. And in my experience, when we are able to control what is in our circle of concern, we're able to control our life with that much more.
Yeah, I'll just add one last thing here as we wrap up. And I don't want the listeners to think that, you know, reactive versus proactive, that there's one better than the other. But what I think we're talking about is our circle of influence is how we monitor our reactions and our proactions, right? If you go to Thanksgiving dinner in the defensive, ready to share what you know, you're probably gonna face surprises that will lead you astray from your plan. And I say this because I got crazy family, right? But if you go to Thanksgiving dinner with your plate as a a metaphorical tub of popcorn, and you're ready to just take in and learn from everybody, then you're going to have a much better time at Thanksgiving than the stressful, like, catching up with people and sharing all your knowledge. And then there's the, maybe this is just my Thanksgiving. I'm not speaking to the choir here. But there's just so much that can happen, right? But I think that our influence is so powerful. Language. And I always come back to communications because it's something that I'm constantly working on. It's something that I focus on a lot. But the way we talk to ourselves, the things we think, okay, the way that we react is something that we can work on, so that proactive reaction becomes something a little bit more. I was also thinking about, like, programmed reactions. Like, I wrote in the chat here as we were talking, Ian, you inspired this. Yeah, it's going to rain, so bring an umbrella. You know, you can control the outcome. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know, you can react and say, oh, darn it, you know, it's raining outside, I'm going to get wet. And, like, if it rains, program yourself to say, I love the rain. In fact, I love it so much, I'm going to turn every rainy moment into a dancing in the rain moment and do something fun and silly and different, and change the way you think about things. And that's about being a bit proactive, having that control of self, of mind, but having the influence within to expand and ripple effect that out. I'm taking things full circle, as we have talked about today. Circle imagination. So, and I know that we were everywhere, but this was truly an enhancing conversation for my knowledge and feelings. So I appreciate you guys having me as your guest on this, because it is a place where there's a lot of interpretation. I can feel that the listeners will want to go and introspect on this and really look inward and say, where am I in all of this? And I highly recommend you pick up a copy of the book, take a look at it. It's the first of many great habits. It is being proactive.
Love that. And yeah, we have danced all around different aspects and things here. You point up, you know, there's reactive versus proactive, and I'm going to disagree with you that there is one that's better. Proactive is better. But you can proactively be reactive. One of my favorite all-time quotes from this book is, people too often listen with the intent to respond rather than listening with the intent to understand. And if you listen with the intent to understand, you will be able to respond in a better way. Just like that family reunion one. If you go there with the intent to react positively to people, you proactively set yourself up to do that. So having said that, I'm going to finish with an analogy or a story from one of the great cinema masterpieces, talking about control and influence and concerns. It's called Strange Brew. Look it up later on if you haven't seen that one yet. Definitely one of the classics out there. But there's a scene where the two characters are in a big rig truck going down a steep, windy mountain road, and the villain has cut the brakes. And as they're going down, the one driving says, "There's no brakes." He says, "Well, I guess there's no point steering then." And he lets go of the steering wheel. And they crash in the ocean. But there's things you can control and things you can't. You can't control the brakes being cut, but you could still steer and perhaps make a better situation out of it. When you focus so much on your circle of concern, it leads you to a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. There's nothing I can do. My daughter just cut off her hair. There's nothing I can do. It's the end. My son did the same thing. 7th grade, 2 days before school starts, he goes to the barber and they didn't take checks or credit cards. I had to run to the bank. I come back and he mimicked my haircut. 2 days before school, shaved his head. Going, okay, and it's all of this. There's nothing. What can I do? Do I keep him out of school? And in the end, it's you send him to school, and he dealt with it. And his friends thought he joined the Marines, but literally, when you focus on your circle of influence, your circle of control, that radiates out to your concerns, and that puts you in a position of power and knowing what you can do with your life. Otherwise, you are living in a helplessness. There's nothing I can do. That's not going to move us forward. Focus on your control, be proactive. And I'll leave with that. And watch the movie Strange Brew.
There you go. And with that, Champions wraps up this awesome episode of Champion Reads. If you found inspiration in this episode, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, as well as you can go to our website, mychampionscircle.com, where you'll be able to find a link to the podcast, link to our socials, and everything else going in the Champion Circle universe. Until next time, champions, continue to be the best version of you that you can be. Be the champion in your life. Focus on what you can control. And always, always remember that it's all about control. When it rains, it's time to dance. We'll see you on the next episode of Champion Reads.